which we a movie that we should have watched. It's not dinosaur themed, but it's in the same league as
Mhm.
Velocipaster, in my opinion, is Zombievers.
Yes, very good. We
Love
are
Zombievers.
Good
live, aren't
times.
we?
We are live.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
So, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, David Strege, and here we have another lively entertainment plan for you as
Mm-hmm.
we enter into the month of May, where we do a meet the cast moment, and it's my day to show you a movie that I thought was really bad the first time I watched it, and it's kind of surprising because I actually liked it the second time around.
So this
Um,
could have been for the second chances month.
it could have been for a month, I guess, but I also watched American Mummy again, and I still hated it. So, but I wanted to show the group the level of bad. I mean, if you want to talk bad, this is bad. You know, to me, before you say something is bad or worse, hold your tongue.
Well, there is a value to knowing just how deep that rabbit hole goes. There
Yeah,
really is.
there
So
is.
the movie that I tasked y'all to watch for tonight's main event was originally called Z-Rex, the Jurassic.
Also a much better
Yeah,
title.
I was gonna say that's a much better
Not
title.
really. I actually like the Jurassic Dead better.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, okay, it's the Jurassic Dead. That's a fine title. It neither title is deceptive in the same way that American Mummy was deceptive.
Oh,
Um, so I mean, it's kind of an either or thing. But for me, Z-Rex just has a good ring to it. But I do like the Jurassic Dead as well. But again, it's not false advertising, which is good.
Uh, so
Mhm.
the film was directed by two directors, one of them being Milko Davis, and the other one being Thomas Martwick, in 2017. And like I had said in the previous discussion with American Mummy, it was sold at Walmart stores across the
mhm.
nation at the same time as American Mummy.
To the
And
chagrin of everybody.
and both of them had some pretty nice fancy covers on them. So in fact, if you look at my avatar there, that is part of the cover for the Jurassic Dead cover, and that is pretty neat looking. But
Which if there's one thing that I can most definitely give these direct to video, especially in Walmart, those kinds of movies with the catchy titles like Tsunami and
Yeah.
Sharkenstein and Raiders
what
of the Lost Shark, all that stuff.
you mentioned Tsunami because Tsunami, one of the actors in Jurassic Dead is from Tsunami.
Well, and also
Ooh,
the
Nice.
director is the same. I'm looking at this. Milko Davis directed Tsunami as well.
Hmm.
So,
I
yeah.
can't
Well,
really, I can't really mock that.
the thing that I was gonna say was that even if the movies themselves are not really all that good,
Yeah.
one thing I will say about at least the ones that make it that far to Walmart or whatever, they
Mhm.
tend to have some pretty eye-catching posters slash DVD covers, and that's important. I mean, I've seen a lot of big budgeted movies that the poster to me looks so forgettable and so just disgustingly ordinary that I'm like, why bother if you're gonna do that? I mean, at the
Mhm.
very least, something like Sharkenstein, the cover is memorable, and so is the title. And I mean, there's a reason why Sharknado was what it was, is because they had a great title, had a great
Right.
kind of
I think that
meme
Shark
worthy.
was actually a pretty well done sci-fi movie.
Yeah, well, it was a great series because they just kind of got crazier as they went along, and it's like that's how you got to do it. It's just
Oh yeah.
keep breaking through the ceiling of ridiculousness. It's like you gotta do that. And so I guess that my larger point is that at the very least they have pretty imaginative names, pretty imaginative titles, eye-catching posters, things like that help to at the very least make them stand a chance in the grand scheme of what all you could be watching. And in this particular case, the Jurassic Dead, it does that as well. It's got a great poster. The title definitely does catch your attention. It's just we'll have to decide if we think it's worthy of our kind of cheese-tastic crown of glory.
Right. So let me just go through here and just do a small little synopsis here of the story. So apparently, a crack scientist aligns with the axis of evil to bring down the U.S. of A. with EMP blasts, toxic zombification gas, and unleashing of the ultimate undead killing monstrosity, the Z-Rex. When a hot-wired militia squad and a crew of college hipsters are thrown together to do something about it, chaotic predator thunder action runs amok.
That's one way to put it.
So, let's get first impressions here. Since Jake, you weren't on our last discussion, I'm going to start with your impression of this film. And was this a first time watch for you?
I can pretty definitively say this was a first time watch. And again, as I said earlier, I can't believe this is the first movie I watched completely on my new computer. I used the Ballad of Buster Scruggs to test the video quality. But I only watched most of the first segment of that one. So this is really the first full movie I watched on my brand new computer, and my computer is probably wondering what the hell I'm thinking. But
probably got an STD now.
Yes. Although I like what Mo said earlier. He said you got to start with something dirty, and then it'll appreciate everything else. But I will admit I found it relatively entertaining. It was pretty awful, but it was kind of in that gray zone. It wasn't just awful where I'm like, why am I doing this? But it was nowhere near the glorious heights of something like like we were talking at the beginning, Velocipaster, which is really a bad movie, but it's such a fun bad movie.
Yeah, it knows exactly what it is, and it just goes for it. And that I felt the same way with you. I think that this it was like there were parts of it that kind of gave me that impression, but there was a lot that kept it from those lofty heights.
Right. Yeah.
And what about you, Brandon? Now, what were your thoughts on this particular film?
Well, I was going into it with a bit of worry, considering my experience with American Mummy and
yeah, I hyped up the badness of both of them, so that I would have you guys go into it with a little trepidation.
Well, you succeeded.
And what was weird is that I didn't. Of course, maybe it's because American Mummy was so boring. So when I actually got to watch this, I was like, this isn't terrible. I didn't fall asleep. I was pretty happy with that. So I was okay with it. And there were things that amused me in it, which...
It was no artifacts, right?
It was definitely not artifacts. And it was... It was entertaining in parts, which is more than I can say for American Mummy. So,
Hmm.
Okay, and when I got to that part where they started turning the humans into the zombies, that's where I was like, okay, that's it. I've got to turn this off. But then later I watched it myself, the rest of it myself, because my fiance had gotten to that point where she was like, "This is stupid," and so I hadn't watched it until earlier today, and I actually rewatching it actually kind of liked the beasting up of the character as it went and progressed. I mean, yeah, none of this was done in the desert. You can tell that, but
yeah.
for some reason, even though there was a moment where the dinosaur looked like he was being rolled in on wheels.
Yeah.
Uh,
But the dinosaur did look like it was really there.
it did look
Yeah.
really there at times, but there were times that you could really tell the CGI was there, and that's the bad thing that I would like to say, because when it got really close up to when you saw the mouth open up over the victims or whatnot,
Mhm.
you could tell that it was something that they had actually created to actually be mechanical to so they did spend some money on the creature effect, so
Yeah.
Mhm.
it's not that they didn't, but there was a level of badness about the movie, and maybe Dane can explain some of that.
Yeah. Well, okay, so when this was being sold in Walmart alongside American Mummy, I did pick it up, but I never watched it, and then I eventually sold it when I sold a bunch of stuff to get some money quickly. But
That you watched it?
yeah, I didn't watch it then, but I watched it before before this. And I'm glad I finally did. It like I said, there are things about it that I liked. It was not I'll say this, it was not quite as boring as American Mummy was. It wasn't really all that exciting either. Like I think it did kind of drag, but it had some effort put behind it in terms of some of the cheesiness, but there were too many things about it that what the heck was that? I heard someone screaming. Anyway, there were too many things about it that I think kept it from greatness because it wasn't campy enough to be cheesily great. It wasn't well, and it wasn't quite self-aware enough, I think, and it also relied a little too much on reference to other things at the expense of doing what those kinds of movies do best, which is just really going for it and just come up with a ridiculous concept, a ridiculous monster, and just milk it for all it's worth, like Lava Lantula, Sharknado, and see all the Zombievers, just like take something like that and just run with it, make it as ridiculous as you can possibly make it. And I just felt like this was like, oh, hey, look at that. It's sort of Duke Nukem in this movie. Oh, look at that. It's sort of Battle Without Honor or Humanity as they're walking in a straight line.
Oh,
Look at that. It sort of has a Resident Evil or Dino Crisis feel to it. Oh, look at that. It's kind of like that, and it was that for a lot of the movie, plus some of the most annoying characters.
Yes.
Not the commandos. I wish it was just them, but like the our other heroes, like they were some of the most insufferable characters I've encountered in a movie in a long time.
Uh,
It was quite something. I was like, wow.
I
I
did get
didn't.
a kick out of the one scene where they were up against that fence, and he was arguing that he was the jock, And then she was in the background saying, "Okay, are you guys done being manly? Let's go here."
I will admit, for me, one of the films, and of course there will be spoilers, as there always are. For me, one of the film's saving graces was, if you don't count one of the commandos who really wasn't in it for long, the first two to go were the two insufferably stupid ones. So that was good. I liked that. But, and anyway.
Well, let's see so let's look at the plot here. So apparently, in the very beginning, we see that this doctor dude, scientist, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Dr. Wojciech Borg, or Borg, and Cooper Elliott. And apparently, he is trying to sell his scientific serum that he has just created to some covert black ops thing, and he realizes that they are just going to weaponize the damn thing, and so he turns it against them. And then apparently there's a little segment here which is out of the blue, which apparently he's teaching a class as a professor, and he reanimates a dead cat.
Yeah.
What do you think about that scene, fellas?
Odd.
It's like there was no point to that entirely.
Oh, by the way, the reanimation liquid glows green, just like in Reanimator.
Oh, yeah.
And it brings anything dead to life that it, that you inject it with or whatever. It, that I noticed right away, and I was like, is there anything that they're gonna try to do that's somewhat original? I mean, up to having your main commando look exactly like Duke Nukem and have him even named after him, but with other spelling, have people reference him that way. It's like that's pretty overt.
From what I understand, that commando, his name is Duke, but in real life his name is Andy Heyman. From what I understand, he's actually a bodybuilder in real life.
He looked like it. He looked like Brock Lesnar a little bit.
Yeah, he was a bodybuilder in real life, and I think the directors were trying to ham up his character a little bit, a bit to give him screen time, probably to enhance his career. So at least that's what I got out of it. So to be honest, I actually kind of enjoyed his character.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I think that those commandos, like, they at least had the makings for some fun characters. Are whatever teenage heroes, like they're a lost cause right when we first meet them. So just ditch them right off the bat. But the commandos themselves, like, okay, they at least had potential. For me, it was just more so, okay, it's fine if you want to. This wasn't even like setting itself up as an outright parody or something. This wasn't, and thankfully it wasn't one of the like scary movie sequels or anything like that, because like but you know what I mean? Like that's like explicitly a spoof, and this isn't really that. But it's just more the fact that they're pretty explicitly referencing him as Duke Nukem, and they do a couple other video game references too. Like they reference Metal Gear Solid, which, I mean, okay, they're referencing games that were popular like when I was a kid, and I mean, as far as reference material goes, that's better than some other things I could name, but still, it's like it's so overt at the expense of doing what a movie like this does best, which is just throw ridiculous shit at the screen and go all the way with it for a glorious touchdown of cheesiness. And this just felt like they were trying to combine too many pre-existing things without really going all the way with their central concept.
I did find it kind of interesting that they threw in a stoner chick that just apparently had these like ultra uber like computer talents, you know.
Yeah.
That she was in fact somewhat of a hacker.
I'm curious, like Dane, you're talking about how you feel like everything in here seemed to be a reference or whatever. If you or anyone else had a particular idea in mind of what might have been referenced by that whole college segment, because it's like, for me, a couple things come to mind. That one part of him trying to do a reanimation spiel, whatever. And the one random kid in the class heckling him about, well, aren't you this, that kind of reminds me
that
of
was like young Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like, well, at least that's a good reference if that was intentional, but otherwise, I don't know. But the other one is, I wonder if that whole thing was just in there because of that old joke, which I'm not sure I agree with, but the whole joke of like, well, those who can't do teach. And that's like, since he couldn't work in the government anymore, obviously he started teaching. And it's like, or then he couldn't hack it as a professor because he's insane. But
Yeah.
I was wondering if anyone thought that they saw anything more explicit in that, or if it was
you mean specifically the scene where they get introduced, the teens?
I was thinking the college sequence.
Oh,
before
that.
Yeah.
I would have said, like you said, kind of Reanimator cross with Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Now one that was pretty blatant, and I was like, really? Did you honestly do that? Was the pretending like the fence is electrified? That was pretty overt, and I was like,
"There's going to be at least one Jurassic Park reference in there."
Yeah, I mean, it could have been worse, but still, I was like, that was a little too much, I think. Well, there was that one, and then also even the part with the girl hacking into everything just because the script needs her to. That's also kind of Jurassic Park-ish.
Right.
It just. Well, and also the dinosaur wandering, or like one dinosaur roaming around this interior space with our heroes trying to stay alive. I mean, that is essentially the plot of Dino Crisis, if I recall correctly. Yeah. It's basically like Resident Evil, but with dinosaurs instead of zombies. But it's like that gave me that strong feeling, and I mean, all of that wouldn't be quite so noteworthy if the characters, if there was more humor that worked, if the characters were not so insufferably annoying, and if the whole thing, almost the whole thing, wasn't green screened. That was that was really, like, I honestly, as I was watching this, I was trying to decide which do I like less, this or American Mummy, and this was not as boring as American Mummy was, but at the very least, American Mummy was shot where the story was set with real things and real stuff in front of the camera, and they just had way too much badly composited green screen in this film to make it enjoyable. Now, again, the dinosaur itself, it did look like, if you've ever seen those, they do have them at certain, I guess I want to say, like either theme parks or something, but they have these kind of life-size dino suits that a human can get inside and walk around, and they look amazing. You can still see like their human, you can still see their human legs kind of, attached to the dinosaur legs, so you can see how they're walking, but like, just in terms of seeing about as good as of a representation of a dinosaur moving and interacting in real life, that isn't animatronic, that's about as good as you're going to get. And it looked like something along those lines. I've seen that done in person. I've seen that done, and it looks great. And it looked like they were doing something like that. I didn't see a lot of really obvious CGI when the
Yeah.
dinosaur was concerned. That was really nice. I would have liked to see more things like that. And you could have found a warehouse or something. Maybe it wouldn't have been as snazzy as that one, but still, it would have really been there. It couldn't. Well, and like, okay, here's a good example of how to do this kind of movie on a low budget, how to do it well, in a way that's engaging and where you're still shooting real things for the most part. There's an Asylum movie called Avengers Grimm, which is basically the fairy tale characters. They come to our world and they have to find a way back and that sort of thing. But they clearly didn't have a lot of money, and yet they utilized real locations, and they managed to. I think it was actually pretty darn good for what it was. It was it had the right scale, and it seemed like they really did their best to try to make it feel bigger than it was. And so, I mean, you can do that and do it well, without having to spend a lot of money. It is possible.
What about you, Brandon? What did you think about the film as a whole and the characters that were involved in the film?
I didn't mind it. I could see some of the little parody elements that they were doing. At least they weren't trying to take it seriously, which I will admit, I felt American Mummy was trying too hard to take it seriously. I feel like they could have done a little bit better than what they did, but still, at the same time, I think that it was a pretty okay effort, just not great effort. I did like the Duke Nukem guy for some reason. I got the joke. I think it fell flat for the most part, but I did enjoy it.
He at least seemed like he was having fun, and like he was
Yeah.
Well,
like
yeah,
he was well suited for his role.
Mhm.
Well, and his hair, well, the glasses and hair and everything, it all looked correct as far as Duke Nukem goes. If they'd have wanted to make a Duke Nukem movie like he or like Dolph Lundgren, if they were trying to do it like in the 90s, they would have been good choices. Jean-Claude Van Damme would have been a good choice, even though his accent would have gotten in the way. But this guy at least looked that part, and he looked, I think that the Commandos, they kind of reminded me of cosplayers that I've seen, but good ones. Which for this kind of movie, this level of budget, that's pretty good. It's serviceable. But then you had like the one girl with the fakest wig I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that like what color was her hair naturally? It's like, why couldn't you have just let her had her normal hair? Why'd she have to wear the worst wig I've seen in forever?
was that a wig?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
It
wig.
looked like it.
It looked like the most obvious wig I've ever seen in a movie. Like
What
people
should have been her real hair?
well, people complained about Kate Mara's wig in the reshot scenes in Fantastic Four, but that looks like her real hair compared to this.
Well,
Yeah, I thought something was off with her hair. Like it was either a bad wig or a horrible dye job. I mean, there was something off.
Well, and okay, so the reason why I'm pointing it out is I know it's a wig because I've used not for me personally, but in films that I've done, I've had characters that have wigs, and the way to do it right is you have to have like what's called a lace front wig, and that way you can blend it in with the makeup. You can more easily hide your natural hair. You can still kind of tell with it depends on the quality of the wig, of course, but like, some of them are made out of real hair and they're so good that you could never tell. But it just depends, because like the actual like part of the hair, like what we saw with her, you can kind of tell that it's a little too close together, a little too fine, a little just too artificial looking, and also just some of the hair is a little clumpy relative to how it is in real life. And it's just almost also the line between where the skin ends and the hair begins is a little too clean, relative to the way it is for most people, where it's pretty uneven. So I mean, it's those little clues that you can spot, especially if you've worked with those kinds of wigs before. Those are pretty dead giveaways.
So, I was getting a Stifler vibe off of the Gunnar character. What about you?
Stifler was funnier and smarter, and that's a pretty low bar in the first place.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I guess that character is actually the voice of Superman behind Justice League Dawn of Apocalypse. I guess that's an animated feature that has come out.
The Justice League Dark Apocalypse War?
Yeah.
Neat.
And from what I understand, there's another character in here that is the voice of someone in here too. I think it was the guy who played that bald-headed guy, not the doctor himself. I think. Let's see. No, but he plays in a Justice League movie called Trinity Force. As Metallo, so I guess
Metallo, yeah.
Or at least the voice of him, at least. So I guess some of these guys are like some of the voices behind some of the more recent Justice League movies.
Well, and that's nice that they're getting some in front of the camera work, because voice actors, if they're good, then they can make obviously a very good living just being in everything pretty much, and just kind of like, I mean, you look at like Mark Hamill's filmography, or
Right.
just people that do Phil Lamar, Jim Cummings, Patrick Warburton, a lot of like the usual people that you kind of encounter in the voiceover world. Maurice LaMarche, all the big names in VO, Gray Delisle. You can see just how robust their filmography really is, because you especially if they're really good and they can do a lot of voices, then they can really turn it on and really fit into a lot of different roles. And you can really see that with any number of animated shows, where they'll usually have most of the characters doing, or most of the actors doing, a few characters at least.
Right.
Because they can, and because, well, why not? Use the full range of their talent. And but you're like, well, don't you want to see what they can do in front of the camera? Because like, if you've ever seen them record, that it's not just a vocal exercise. Like, usually the faces they make, the gesticulations they make, all of that goes into the performance, and it also can help influence the animators when they watch it back, because that way they see what the actor did. So in other words, they have the necessary skills that it takes to be good in front of the camera. It's just that so rarely do they get a chance to do that. And so it's nice to see that happen in some way. Like, even Tom Kenny started off in front of the camera. He actually had a part as a villainous clown in Shakes the Clown, which is a very underrated movie, I think.
I just picked that up for $1.
Yeah, it's really good. I liked it a lot. But like, he played a really creepy clown in that. Like, he could have played the Joker. It was that creepy, and I was like, oh, that's great. I love it.
Well, like some of the ones you mentioned, like Mark Hamill and Patrick Warburton, have picked up a fair bit of work in front of the camera. Although Warburton's stint as the Tick was way too short. But yeah, it's interesting when you see it. Like his co-star in Adventure Brothers, James Urbaniak. I watched an episode yesterday of Supergirl that featured Urbaniak as an alien scientist. And I'm like, it's nice seeing him in front of the camera. You know, I know him as Rusty Venture, but it's nice seeing him in other roles too.
Yeah.
It's
Or
kind
like
of
there's a voice actress, Sarah Natacheni, who it was not the original voice of Ash from Pokemon, but I guess a later one. Well, it's funny. Adult women tend to voice young boy characters quite frequently, but like she's a really beautiful person, and so is Tara Strong. And it's like, wouldn't you like to see them more in front of the camera? Because I know that they would have the talent to do it. It's just for whatever reason, certain things just kind of take off for you. Or even like Phil Lamar, like he was Marvin in Pulp Fiction, the kid who gets shot in the face.
Really?
Yeah, that was him.
I
That was Phil
forgot that
Lamar.
was him.
Yeah, because he was the voice of John Stewart, the Green Lantern on Justice League. He did a whole bunch of voices. I guess Samurai Jack.
He had several roles on Futurama. I think.
Yeah.
He's the one that played Hermes, isn't he?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
But so in other words, it can be done, and it's nice to see them doing it in some way. I just kind of wish that in this case they might have gotten better material, but
Right.
it's something that it's just nice to see them get to do things they would normally get to do. And it's funny because a lot of voice actors, I think, can be good in front of the camera when they get the chance. Not always the case the other way around. Just because you can be in front of the camera for whatever reason doesn't necessarily mean you're good behind the mic.
There are some where it goes both ways. Like you're talking about Pulp Fiction. Sam Jackson definitely is a good voice actor, and there are a couple. And you've had a couple others like I think almost the entire assembled cast for Fantastic Mr. Fox. They were all big name front of the camera stars for the most part, but they all did a phenomenal job behind the mic. But you're right, it doesn't always go that way, and sometimes it like you see these big, like these celebrity redubs of anime sometimes fall kind of flat. You get really talented actors doing passable work. And if they had gone with the lesser known but more established voice actors, they might have got a better dub,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's something that people will talk about all the time with at least American animation, the acting that it was done before Aladdin and then after Aladdin, because after Aladdin it was like every animated film had to have celebrity voices pretty much, like, and it was not that way for most of animation history.
Well, Robin Williams kind of set the bar a little bit high when it came to animation.
Yes, he did.
He was a great voice actor.
Well, I think he set the bar so high that I don't think anybody will ever be able to reach it, to be honest, because nobody else can possibly recreate what he did.
Nope. Now, the character of Dr. Wojciech Borg, he reminded me more when he was in charge of the warehouse of Bane in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That probably was on purpose.
I did like that villain. Yeah.
Yeah. They were not above cultural referencing almost anything and everything.
I'm not sure Bane's the one that came to mind, though. I was thinking a little bit of Vader, when the mask is off, but he's still got, that. But there was something else that wasn't really coming to mind. But now I think I'm thinking of it. He kind of reminded me like someone who could have come right out of a Mad Max movie.
Yeah. Like I was, at first when he got introduced in the mask and everything, I was like, oh look, it's Dr. Doom. But then I thought when he did his thing over the his message over the hologram, which of course was it looked exactly like a Star Wars transmission.
Yeah.
Which then it was like, oh, it's sort of like if you combined Darth Vader and the Emperor together,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. But yeah, when he first got introduced, I thought, oh, look at that, it's Doctor Doom. But I have to say he was probably one of my favorite. I wasn't crazy about him before the mask and everything, but once he got in the mask and the hood and he had the ugly fingers and stuff, I was like, okay, this is.
Of course, the wheelchair made me reminded of Xavier from X-Men. So
Yeah, kind of a evil version of it. Yeah, but I mean, we'll see. But that was the nice thing about that character was that you could see some combinations of things, but it was not so blatantly supposed to be just one thing. It to where like the combinations seemed to kind of give him his own character, and I could have used more things like that in this film, and I think there was plenty of room for it too. It just for whatever reason they decided to be really, really blatant with Duke Nukem there, and well, and you all noticed the Battle Without Honor or Humanity music that was playing. Well, it was like a sound alike, as it wasn't note for note the same, but it was very clearly a ripoff.
zombie.
That was when they were walking in a straight line before they get inside of the.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was ripping right off of Kill Bill. And
what about?
What
about the moment when Duke Nukem turned zombie? Or
yeah, he was like, "Oh, look, he's the Hulk now."
Yeah, a little bit. You wouldn't like him when he's angry.
Slow motion walk down the end of the hall, So,
that's the thing.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that's the thing. It reminds me, and we've been covering some of the X Strikes catalog here during some of our pre-shows, and we'll probably get back to it after we're done with the Meet the Cast, probably in July. A lot of that, and a lot of the places where they fell short were they kind of fell short with a lot of cultural references that didn't necessarily get recognized right away, or were not quite done to the level that that would have probably suited them best.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to do cultural references, I mean, you could have done it a lot smarter. I mean, this wasn't anywhere near as obnoxious as far as that goes. It wasn't anywhere near as obnoxious as Family Guy, where too often, but like you know what I mean, like too often.
Nobody as obnoxious as that.
No, I mean, I really don't like Family Guy on a lot of levels, but not the least of which is the fact that for the most part, when they over rely on cultural references, number one, and number two, they're not even, for the most part, they're not even really jokes. They're just more they tend to confuse references with jokes, and those are not the same thing. And this kind of started to veer into that territory a little bit, but again, nowhere near as blatant or as obnoxious or as like aggressively repetitive as Family Guy.
Oh God, no.
Like that show really, not to get too far off topic, but it's like that show really is a masterclass of how not to write humor in the modern it's okay, so it's not how to not write humor, but also just I'm more baffled at like how people find it funny, because like it just, I mean, there's an okay joke every now and again, but it's like it's just kind of the basically just watch the episode of South Park where they make fun of Family Guy, and that does a better job than I ever could. That does a better job of saying it than I ever could.
The manatees choosing the words.
Yeah. That's basically what it comes down to. And I mean, Trey Parker said as much, that he doesn't like being compared to them because the jokes in the show are pretty much interchangeable. You could put them in any episode, and
Oh.
That's absolutely right. And the jokes aren't even funny. They're just more so of like, let's plug in this 80s pop culture reference with this celebrity who's, whatever level of famous, and just throw it in there and it'll work because people have heard of it and the audience is stupid. And generally speaking, the people that really love Family Guy tend to be really dumb, I have found.
And in its defense, I will say, and I don't really love Family Guy as much. Jake could tell you because he used to really love it back in the day, and I was like off on it. Now I'm lukewarm to it, but the first couple of seasons, it really did a good job. It was fairly clever. The writing was snappy.
Yeah.
And then it got tired because it kept going and going and going. Sort of like how The Simpsons is now. It's gotten tired. It took it longer with The Simpsons, but The Simpsons is now almost as tired as Family Guy is.
I would say the second and third seasons of Family Guy were actually really good, I think.
Yeah.
But speaking of 80s references, sometimes dead is better.
and there's a magic to allowing things to have their time. And it's not good to just keep beating a dead horse and keep things alive just because it's a recognizable brand name. There's such a thing as allowing something to walk off
with dignity.
To walk off into the sunset gracefully. I mean, something that I will always applaud Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis for is that there is in writing an agreement that says that there will not be any more sequels or spin-offs to Back to the Future. That they're just it stays pure, it stays the way it is. It's just keep it, and thankfully and people still love those movies, and they still Universal still makes a lot of money off of them on home video or using the DeLorean and stuff like that. So I mean, it's not like they're not putting that IP to good use. It's just like there is such a thing as letting something age gracefully. Don't ruin it, and just let it be what it is. And you can still promote the crap out of it. You can still like Snow White for Disney didn't need a sequel, but they were able to use Snow White in other things.
There's a lot of Disney movies that didn't need sequels.
I know. Well, I mean, at the very least with them, if they did do sequels, they were direct to video. I mean, so they were easier to dismiss. But like, you get my point, is that even a movie from 1937, Snow White, even then the likeness of Snow White can be put to use decades later, almost a century later. And it can still resonate with people. And so that's kind of my point. But yeah, we got way off topic there from the Jurassic Dead.
Right.
So that's the thing, is it is that way with but that's the thing, is it is that way with all of the references and the stuff like that. It tries. The biggest difference is you really have to work at it to get the references, which is at its detriment. I mean, Family Guy, for what it's worth, you don't have to work at the references. They spell them out to you quite clearly.
They hit you over the head with a mallet.
Some of the references will be more obvious to some people than others, but when you hit so many of them, like you said, throw it against the wall and see what sticks. But like this one, since so many of them were like video game references and that kind of thing, like I probably only caught a fraction of the references y'all did. I mean, I got some. I don't know the game Duke Nukem, but I know the character name. I know of it. I can definitely visualize, oh yeah, Duke Nukem. Oh yeah, I get that. I fully get it. And some of these references I fully got, but some of them I was like, yeah, okay, I think I vaguely know what they're going for here.
One joke they did on a fairly recent episode of Family Guy, and yes, I do still watch it. I don't love it, but it's a guilty pleasure of mine. So they had a thing where they did the joke, and they actually said, some of you might not actually get this reference because many of you were born a little bit too late. So we're going to run the original commercial just so you can get the full-on reference that we're getting. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I get that, because then they're parodying their their stuff there. So that joke actually landed okay, because they full on out basically just explained the joke out. And this could have probably used a little bit more explaining in some of their subtleties.
Right.
Except for Duke Nukem.
Well, that, or make it work even if you don't know the reference, which that's, for me, that's always the best way to go, is you can make references all day long, but the story still has to work even if you don't know what the reference is. When it's dependent on you knowing what the reference is in order to get the joke, then it's a bad joke. Or it's bad story structure, or sometimes both. And you see so many examples of that working well. Like, even a good example is something like even Airplane. Like, you don't have to have seen You don't have to have seen 0 Hour in order to get it.
Right.
And you don't have to have ever seen any of the airport movies that were popular in the 70s. You don't have to. You don't have to be familiar with the commercial that they're referencing when she's like, Jib never has a second cup of coffee at home. Like, you don't have to have ever seen that. I haven't. I mean, I wasn't alive at that time, but it still works. Because the context of the joke, you put the joke in a new context to where the reference only makes it that much sweeter, but it doesn't completely fall apart if you don't know it.
Or, like, a good example would be, we mentioned earlier Young Frankenstein, which is probably one of the least it's probably one of the least reference-heavy Mel Brooks films, but it still makes very direct reference to earlier Frankenstein films. It was easily the Frankenstein movie I grew up on. I never even saw the others until later, and it still worked well for me as a movie. But a really good example of a direct reference that Mel Brooks made that landed, whether or not you've seen the film that it was directly referencing, I think this one landed. I think they nailed it. It was one of my favorite moments in Robin Hood Men in Tights, where they were like, and why should we listen to you? Because, unlike some other Robin Hoods, I can speak with a British accent. And it's like a very direct dig at Kevin Costner's inability to speak with an accent. That was very obviously what the joke was about. But it's still, anyone with any familiarity with Robin Hood kind of gets the joke. And I'm like, I just love that moment. But I'm like, I feel like that was a direct reference that worked regardless of your overall,
well, that's how you do it well, is it has to work regardless. And in this case, like, again, it's a little bit like a kitchen sink of, well, clearly these people must have grown up roughly around the time that I did, maybe a little bit before, but like enough to understand, like, oh, okay, so they were there for the Resident Evil in its heyday, for Duke Nukem, for Metal Gear Solid, Dino Crisis, all that stuff. Because I could definitely see those elements in there. Not to mention the fact that our commandos, but besides the person that is directly named after Duke Nukem, besides that, the commandos themselves, just the way that they look and the way that they're introduced, reminds me a lot of the FMV opening of the first Resident Evil. And well, just the overall quality of acting and the overall green screen compositing really did give off a Sega CD FMV or early PlayStation FMV kind of vibe. Like, just because if you've ever seen, or even like maybe an old PC game, you might say, but basically any of those 90s disc-based games that they thought full motion video would be the next coolest thing. Oh wow, they're real people. That was like a big thing for quite a long time. And so basically, if you had a disc based system, then having full motion video, oh, that was so cool. It was so crazy and different. This is going to be the future, and it really wasn't. They really did give off that vibe. If that's what they were going for, then that might have been really cool. It was not clear enough if it was that. To me, it felt more like it was just them not having perhaps the greatest caliber of actors or the best way to direct them, because sometimes it's not even the actors necessarily. It's just if you can have great actors, but if they're given poor direction, then they might as well be bad actors,
Or you can sometimes have mediocre actors who put in a hell of a performance because of the direction.
Oh yeah.
I give Darren Aronofsky props for the performance he got out of Marlon Wayans in Requiem for a Dream. I mean,
oh yeah.
And even if it's the Marlon Wayans can act.
Well, and even if it's something small, like Anna Faris tends to be in a lot of comedies that get raked over the coals, but she herself tends to be sick. Well, she herself tends to be singled out as doing a good job, and then you have her even in a small role, like in Brokeback Mountain.
Right. Or Lost
that was
Translation.
it was like a small role, but still, it was good. She did a good job.
I totally forgot about her. Because wasn't she in Scary Movie?
Yeah, she was.
She's the star of Scary Movie, which is probably one of the reasons why people forget that she does dramatic work.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny, comedians can do really, really good dramatic work.
Sometimes.
And so, and not always the other way around.
Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey, or like for me, the example that I keep coming back to is Adam Sandler. Like he is an unbelievable dramatic actor, to the point where like he really should get more recognition than he does. Like I not only Punch Drunk Love, which I love to death, but I saw the Meyerowitz Stories, New and Selected, and he was fantastic in that. So I mean, he really can do it. He's got the chops for it. He doesn't challenge himself enough, but also I think that I don't know, maybe he doesn't get offered as much as he should. I don't know what the deal is, but
a lot of people tend to overlook anyone who steps out of their comfort zone. Like you get, again, you're right. Adam Sandler got tons of buzz for the Meyerowitz Stories. I mean, he got tons of praise. Uncut Gems and some other stuff.
I was gonna say Uncut Gems.
You're right. And then, of course, we keep coming back to Robin Williams, who did some brilliant work in 1 Hour Photo and in movies like Good Will Hunting, which he did get some praise for.
Won the Oscar for it.
Right. And then, but then it goes to the flip side too. I still say Ray Fine was reamed when he was not up for an Oscar for Grand Budapest Hotel. Jodie Foster gave him some of the best work in her career for Maverick. There are some very talented dramatic actors who get completely forgotten when they go comedic. So it kind of, people just really get pigeonholed way too much. It's very annoying.
Yeah, I hate that. I mean, I try to avoid being pigeonholed whenever possible. Or even like, I've obviously been doing a lot of horror stuff lately. Even within that, I try not to do the same thing twice if I can help it. And horror is an interesting example because that genre is so unbelievably diverse, much more than people think. Like people that only know slasher films and don't like them, they don't know anything about horror. But it's probably the most versatile genre that there is, so you can pretty much do anything you want within it. It's that multifaceted, but so even within that, I've tried to always do something different, and that way I don't get pigeonholed, because as soon as you get pigeonholed, then you don't grow and you just do the same thing over and over again, and then you just kind of half-ass it. And it's no wonder why most of Adam Sandler's filmography tends to be kind of the same thing over and over again, and where the thing that he
I was
chooses.
using my whole ass.
Well, yeah, it's like don't half-ass it. Don't half-ass it. Go whole ass always. But like with him, it's like when the big determining factor for whether you'll go with a movie or not is where you get to vacation. I mean, that's not a good sign. Because that's why we'll pick a lot of like more conventional stuff. I mean, not like the Meyerowitz stories or something like that, but it's just that's very telling right there. So
well, I feel like whenever they get something like that, they don't get a lot of the respect that they deserve.
yeah,
Which is why they tend to go back to what makes them money, what it is that is there. I remember that he was very frustrated on how Uncut Gems performed, and on top of that, you look at other people like. There was a time when Jim Carrey he went straight to drama because he did pretty well with the Truman Show, but after that he did some wonderful performances, but only got minor recognition and almost fell into obscurity for a long time.
yeah, it is just criminal.
I mean, it's sad because I guess people looked at him and they just saw, Pet Detective.
I guess, but it's like I'm someone that this is just because it's me, but like I'm somebody that I always try to see in somebody what they don't necessarily see in themselves. And I mean, I think that is, if you're a good director, I think that that's what you do is you see something in somebody that they don't necessarily see in themselves, and you work with them to make it happen. And then once that happens, then the magic is there. I think if you just cast people right, and if you give them the right direction, you kind of lead them in the right path. It just helps so much. Like somebody whose acting potential to me never really got explored to the fullest degree that it could have was Dane Cook, largely because once he started to get into leading man roles in some of the comedies he was in like 2006, 2007, when they didn't really perform well, then he stopped getting those. And I always thought that he was someone who, if you gave him the right role, could do really well in a more of like almost like a Raging Bull type part, somebody that was just kind of trying to get out of this cage that he's unwittingly forced himself to be in and doesn't know how to get out of.
And I still find it a crying shame talking about Cook and bringing it back to Anna Faris. I can't believe how much people just dismissed Waiting, whereas anyone that I know who's worked in restaurants loves the movie. Anyone who's ever worked in a restaurant is like, this movie is awesome because it's true. It's so true. And then, it was just dumb comedy by most critics, and they were like, well, this is so unrealistic. And I'm like, no, you never worked in a restaurant.
Yeah, clearly. Which again, I really do not give most conventional film critics any kind of credence anymore, just because for the most part they're just kind of armchair critics or armchair this and that when they don't know the reality of that experience. And
every single screening that I've ever been to, all those chairs that are supposedly supposed to be for critics are empty.
Well,
no one here in Milwaukee, except for a select few, sits.
One person that I think the critics hated that a lot of people really undersold, but you could tell, even though he did a lot of dumb comedies, he showed so much variety within the comedies, was Jim Varney. I mean, his Ernest movies were they were acting showcases. He was doing all these different characters and nailing them. And every now and then he'd get another role like Jed Clampett. Was it Jed Clampett? Whichever one he played in Beverly Hillbillies. He'd get some good roles, but everyone always thought him as Ernest, and it frustrated the hell out of him. And when the Oscars did the in memoriam, I was so happy they did not show an Ernest clip. I was like, I think they showed that voice. But I was like, because I knew that frustrated the hell out of him. And it was just like, because that's what everyone thought. Everyone was like, well, he just does Ernest, And I was like, yeah. And I was like,
he was a tremendous character actor. I mean, when I watched one of his first major films, Dr. Otto and the Gloom Beam, he didn't play Ernest. The character was a cameo at the very end. And that was really the first appearance, supposedly, of Ernest in film. But he played the movie showcased his ability to play all the different characters. But yes, you're right. Even every Ernest film was all about a showcase of his different character, his ability as a character actor. I really think that if he had kept up with more voice acting, that would even be better because, I mean, he had some amazing voice acting. Toy Story, good example.
Yeah, he was the original Slinky, which obviously had to be replaced with Toy Story 3 after he had died.
Yeah.
But
I think he passed away right around the time 2 came out or something like that. It was pretty close. But yeah. But it's all these movie folks want. Pies.
So how were the special effects in this film?
I kind of agree with Dane's analysis.
Well, again, the dinosaur for the most part was pretty damn good, but then they had to overly green screen everything else around it, and it's like, well, no matter how good the dinosaur looked, it doesn't look as good as it could because of all the other shit that's surrounding it. And but again, kudos where it's due, that they did use I assume like either a dinosaur suit or a puppet or something. I do agree that there was that one scene where it looked like it rolled, but I mean, I would have taken that over like we saw with Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus, the CGI whale shot that they reused several times, the same exact shot that they reused several times in a row. It's like, wow.
I'll admit, I didn't find the green screen as distracting as you guys did, apparently. But I tell you, the one thing I did find very distracting to the point, comically so, was their way of illustrating explosions and flame effects and that sort of thing.
They used the exact same preset flame effect.
They should have just done with like they did with Velocipaster and just said insert flame effect here.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, that would have been awesome if they'd have done that. But yeah, I'm right there with you because, like, see, having worked in After Effects myself, I've done green screen work myself. I have seen the presets for like explosions or for fire or for this and that because they Adobe After Effects comes with its own presets for those things, and I have seen what they look like, and I also know when someone is using a preset over and over again and they use the exact same fire effect for every explosion, and I'm like, come on, man. Well, hey, people criticize Michael Bay for having explosions everywhere. Well, at the very least the explosions he has for the most part tend to really be there, and even if they're not, they're all at least different, So, and because no two explosions are alike in real life.
I did enjoy the zombie transformation of Duke Nukem, though.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't mind a lot of the zombie effects that were going on with this film. I thought it was entertaining in that sense. I like the glowing eyes. I thought that was a fun little effect, and it told you what was going on at the time. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a simple, easy shout out to, hey, it's a zombie. You know it's a zombie because their eyes are glowing. You know they're turning into a zombie because their eyes are glowing.
And I will admit, and y'all know I am definitely not a connoisseur of gore, and I don't care for it at all in general. But I can appreciate a well done effect in that range. I think most of the gore effects I saw were not well done, but I feel like the part where the dude got shot in the stall at least looked semi-realistic. You know, it wasn't bad. You know, compared to the other stuff. So, you know, I give them props for at least doing an okay job there. And I'm sure, Dan, as much as you hated the characters, you probably liked that one of them had such a pointless and stupid death.
What, the guy getting shot in the head? Well, he was actually the least obnoxious character. Like,
No,
I was
bad.
I was mostly thinking of everybody else.
I kind of
especially
like the girl he was dating, but the other two, oh my god!
I like
the blonde-haired, the blonde wigged girl. She was the worst. Like, holy shit! I couldn't believe how annoying a person could be. Like, I was like, "Can we get Jar Jar Binks back, please?"
Hey, I enjoyed Jar Jar Binks.
I was neither here nor there with him. Like, I think it would have been better if he weren't there, but I didn't like venomously hate him at the time. Well, because I was also a kid, but like I watched it back and I was like, you know, there's not quite as much of him as people think. Like, there's a little too much of him for what the movie should have had, but still, it's like, you know, I think there's enough stuff going on without him to.
Actually, this is one area where I actually feel American Mummy did better. I think that the gore effects in American Mummy were really good, and that mask was awesome. So I will have to give it there. That's the one point in this that I actually feel American Mummy did better. Otherwise, American Mummy was a much worse all across the board.
On the overall production, I'm trying to remember something. It's driving me nuts. The music, the use of music, I know that's a direct cue to something, and I can't remember what. I feel like it's something we saw recently.
Music.
No, like specifically where it's like every time you see the dinosaur, there was like that specific thing that was playing that kind of, you know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was by Alvaro Morello. And he is, so he was in part of the music department of a recent military movie that I actually have called Sector 4 Extraction. I've not watched it, but A Dog's Life TV movie. Let's see, Raiders of the Damned, which I believe was a
Dog's Life, really?
That's a little different.
Beauties and the Boss, the TV series, I guess it was the music.
Beauties and the Boss.
Movie. Let's see. Nothing really all that extravagant except for maybe Operation Repo and he was the music behind Tsunami. So but nothing really extravagant for him except for a couple of random indie movies that I've seen titles of in Walmart before. So so that was a Milko Davis film. I'll have to see if I've got that somewhere. Raiders of the Damned. I've seen that title before. I'm just not sure if I own it yet or not. But so apparently the director Milko Davis has at least been on the indie scene for a little bit. So but other than that, I don't really think there's anything extravagant that this guy has made. Although I do have to say that I love that metal music for some reason of Duke Nukem walking down the hallway. It was kind of
Yeah, that was nice. I mean, there were flashes of moments where you were like, okay, they could have like really gone to town on the cheese factor here, and
they could have
you know,
A-Team expendable on their asses, but they didn't entirely do that.
yeah. I just
think that
go ahead.
I was going to just say the same thing as, like I said, the last film, except I actually think there's less of a trip that they'd have had to go to have made this a fun film, because they already were on the right path. I just feel like they lacked in the execution.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So we talked about the music. Okay. Favorite scenes.
Trying to think.
A favorite scene that they could take from this movie, that or will you think of this as a forgettable movie?
I wouldn't say that. I would say just more it didn't live up to its full potential, right, based on the premise. Favorite scene.
Well,
I think maybe this scene of trying to think, because like I think maybe the scene of them walking in a straight line down the dirt path. I mean, just because I don't know though, because I wasn't really pleased with the fact that the music that they used was just a sound alike of Battle Without Honor or Humanity. But yeah, I mean, at least it looked like a good shot that they put some effort into. And I did like it whenever the dinosaur itself was actually on screen, because again, I liked that it was really there.
Okay. What about you, Brandon? Favorite scene that you could take from it?
I liked the scenes in the beginning where they were introducing the mercenaries. They were kind of fun. I just like the introduction of Duke as it is. He's the most memorable character for me. If I walk away, there's only going to be, second most memorable, because the Doctor is the most memorable. But after the Doctor and that, I would definitely, I mean, those are the things I'm going to take away from this and say, I remember that.
Actually, now that you mentioned the Doctor, I might even say his various monologues. I think those were pretty good for the most part. I think they were kind of unsure as far as like the part where he was like coughing because of the stuff he was breathing in. I think they were a little uncertain about whether that was supposed to be a funny bit or just something that was happening because he was having a hard time breathing. Like, I was a little uncertain as to how I was supposed to take it, but anyway, I think all of his appearances were pretty cool because he seemed like the most original character out of all of them.
Oh, he was fun.
Well, what was that building that was supposed to be the university? I was like, it's not England. It looks like someplace in, I don't know. It almost looked like someplace in France or something. But then when they had that conversation out in the hallway, that was very clearly a green screen effect.
I'm not sure.
Which, what's funny about that though is that actually back in the 70s, when Kubrick was trying to get his Napoleon film off the ground, what he did with the rear screen projection for the ape sequences in 2001, because that was a set, and then they had the wherever they filmed, like Africa or something, they had those backgrounds they projected onto there, and you'd have never known. It was so seamless. And he was wanting to use that same technology for the palaces of Versailles, because obviously you can't shoot in there.
Yeah.
But and I know because it was Kubrick and he was so scrupulous, he had such a scrupulous attention to detail that it would have looked seamless, like you wouldn't have been able to tell.
Right.
But here it's like you kind of saw what that would have been like if that had not been done right, and you could very clearly tell that they were not where they were supposed to be, just because, especially if you look around the edges of their hair and of their skin, and like they were trying to cover up a lot of their green screen work by kind of deliberately over exposing the camera to kind of give it that nuclear winter kind of look. And that was clearly what they were trying to do to cover their asses. But having done it myself, I know those little tricks. So,
Okay. Did anyone else have anything else that they wanted to say about the film before we wrap this up there?
Well, I didn't do favorite scenes.
Oh, well, why don't you
Well, not that I had that many.
well,
There were some parts that I thought were pretty fun, but honestly, I really like movies that end with a nasty little twist at the audience, but not always. Sometimes I hate them. It depends on the twist, depends on the movie. I kind of like that scene where you have the 3 survivors driving away and you see that they're all tweaked. And I thought that was
all
fun.
of them are zombified.
Yes, but honestly, one of my favorite parts, I actually really, really like the end credits sequence where they did like the big comic panels for the characters and everything. I really liked that. I thought that was pretty fun. And
that was they clearly put a lot of work into that, and I was like, that's great. You should have done that work for the green screen compositing, because you clearly did care about this. But yeah, I mean, I like that. And well, one bit where the CGI was pretty darn good was actually when the missiles launch at the end. Like that actually looked pretty good. And you know, it did kind of give me a Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines kind of feel, where despite their best efforts, Judgment Day still comes.
And like I said, I did also like the fact that the 2 that I couldn't stand were basically the 2 that got killed first. I like that.
Yeah.
The biggest minor thing that I wanted to mention is the asteroids heading towards Earth. Except for the idea for the dialogue of, well, I guess this is what they want us to be, die out like the dinosaurs dialogue. I didn't really see any need for asteroids to head there for any really thing, and I think that's what caused the EMT thing to go.
The EMP blast. That's why. Now one thing that was really weird about that I kept asking myself was, okay, so the EMP blast, it fries all of their electronics. It fries the, what I assume is the computer interface inside of the car, all that kind of, all the electronics inside the car. It fries all of that. But then with the helicopter, well, obviously it blew up, but it looked like it was making a soft landing prior to it blowing up. So did the electronics not go out on it right away? Because it seemed like it was flying at a decent distance prior to that having happened. So I don't know, because helicopters are obviously not like planes, because if the power were to go out on a plane, like it would be a rough landing, but you could steer the plane into a landing such that you could theoretically get out of there injured, but you could get out of there.
But in a movie, it always has to explode when it lands.
Yeah, of course. But with a helicopter, the only reason why they fly is because of the spinning of the rotors, and if those things ain't spinning, then you don't have anything to save you. You know, because at the very least, the wings of a plane, there's the lift of the kind of the updraft of air going underneath the wing based on its shape. It's like that has enough to where your engine propulsion to where that doesn't, you could glide down is what I'm saying. It wouldn't be pretty, but you could do it.
Right.
Although with those new gyrocopters, with those fans in the tail, it'll still keep you up in the air somewhat. You'll still go downward.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what they had in the movie.
No.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is like if it was a total electronic frying like they were trying to make it seem like, then I would think that thing would just plummet, because again, with a plane, you could glide your way down, sort of. You might not, might not stick that landing, but you could try.
Helicopter in
But
world.
It could have been powered by rubber bands.
Yeah, but with a helicopter, I'm reminded of the phrase, "I got a rock."
Alrighty. Does anyone else have anything else to add before we?
We spent at least a few minutes talking about the movie.
Yeah.
Well, I think it had more to go on than the other one did. Like the American Mummy, like it was more boring, but I will say that it didn't annoy me. Like this movie, it had a lot more good things about it, but it also, the stuff that was annoying was really annoying. So you could say it had higher highs but lower lows also.
I guess the chick that was dressing in drag with her own wig just couldn't satisfy you, huh?
No, that was like okay, so like the web series that I worked on with my now ex-fiance was Asylum Origins Harley, and we had a lot of wigs on that show, and that's kind of how I know what I'm talking about. But our wigs worked better than that, and it's just like, could you have made a more obvious looking wig? I mean, and if you want to, like, you can have a character wearing a wig, like, because I've known plenty of people that wear wigs in like regular life, whether it's because they lost their hair or whether it's because they want to just try something out, have fun or whatever. Like you can do that. You can work that into the character if you want, but in this case, if that's supposed to be her real hair, which I'm pretty sure it is, then you've just failed, my friend.
Well, evidently that wigged woman is actually a producer for the Jurassic Dead, as well. But she is, in fact, not a blonde. She is, in fact, a brunette.
I figured as much, and I think they probably did it just because they wanted to visually distinguish between the two girls a little easier, and that's a quick and easy way to do it. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't fault their desire to do that, but at the same time, couldn't you have just had her dye her hair? Couldn't you have at least found a better wig or what? It's like there's so many other ways you could have done that.
And they're supposed to be sisters anyway, and they were dressed completely differently. So it's not like they were, whatever.
Nor did they look like sisters.
No.
They didn't even look like sisters.
No.
Alrighty. So on that note, I think we shall end the discussion on. Why don't we begin with you, Dane? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? I'm very interested.
Well, I am Dane Kyle. I have been recently doing a lot of work on the Indie Horror Film Creative YouTube channel with my Blu-ray unboxings and reviews, and just talking about why I collect physical media. And I'm going to transition into talking about filmmaking through my other segment, which is No Money Film School, and that'll help people just have a greater sense of insight with the process of filmmaking. And one easy way to do that I wouldn't mind starting up sometime soon would be to record some commentary tracks for movies. that I know really well as just examples of different aspects of filmmaking and just different things that people can look for. And so that's something easy I can do. But yeah, just trying to really educate people about filmmaking as I have learned it throughout my life.
Okay. And Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm Septum Sen of Septum Sen versus the World. We're a channel that loves physical media, and we are all about that fun physical media goodness there. We do pickup videos, we talk about the stuff coming out, and we also do various other segments. Right now we've been doing more of just a basic vlogcast where we just talk about the things of the day and just movies and entertainment in general. And we've been just having fun in general with this channel. We've had a couple of reviews. Recently did a review for the Dark Web Mystery Box. And
Which I starred
really enjoyed that. Yep, and really enjoyed that one there. And we did a recent Naruto, I did a recent Naruto retrospective, just because I've been watching the series on and off since the early 2000s, so it's quite a milestone to see something like that come to an end here in the United States. Well, unless you count Boruto, and then it just keeps going. But otherwise, I also
M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender.
Of course, the other thing I do is I work on Inside Movies Galore to help with these discussions, but also I help with getting things set up with the next presentations and themes. And of course, as you have noticed, May's theme and part of June's theme is going to be about meeting the cast. So we've, of course, really enjoyed our talk with Dave, with his representations of his taste and referral. Whereas next week we're going to actually move on to meet me as a part of the cast. So we're going to be discussing for the pre-show one of Woody Allen's first films, Take the Money and Run, mainly to go along with a film that it inspired, Evan Jacobs' film Schuster Levine, A Boxing Fable. And if we get lucky enough and we hope hard enough, we may even get Mr. Jacobs himself to come in and join us for those discussions. It'll be very fun.
Join us.
So, Jake, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, well, I'm Jake. I'm a movie and anime and television collector, also here in Central Virginia, and also active on Septum Sen versus World, and also active on these channels, Inside Movies Galore and Delusions of Grandeur. And we obviously we've been doing things a little different, as he said, a little different lately with the doing things from home, as it were, but still getting a lot of good stuff out there, hopefully. And hopefully before long, we'll be able to actually get back together and complete our NIS video and all those kind of things. But in the meantime, we got all kind of goodies coming your way. And well, and I am very excited to be finally working from a new computer, which soon you didn't really get to enjoy the video quality tonight, but next week in the pre-show you will. But soon I intend to actively get into home editing myself, and that will be a nice change of pace, and you might actually see more videos from me when that happens.
And my name is David Strege. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore, and but I run it with all of you. So thank you for coming along with me on this journey, and thanks for joining me on this lovely discussion of this film that we discussed here. But I also moonlight on another channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I discuss and review films. I also do some video pickups of things that I have picked up, so definitely check some of those out. I also did a review of my own on Dark Web, so definitely check that out. It's probably soon to be a very cool film for the independent people out there who love to collect physical media, so definitely check that out eventually too. So
Just don't play any tape they send you.
that says play me on it at least. But in any case, thank you for listening. Have a great day, evening, or morning wherever you are. Just don't go messing with any serums that reanimate shit. That's the thing,
And
man.
always wash your hands.
And
Yes.
maybe think of something original instead of green.
Oh, for the